So thank you for the nice introduction. As Francine shared, we live here in Chattanooga. My wife Tracy's here with us today. Joining us, we have three little girls. We've been here 3 years, and our goal as a family is to put down roots in this area. So we've moved around a lot. Lived in Germany most recently, New Hampshire. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. Something about Chattanooga said home to us, called home to us. So here's where we're building a foundation. And this business really is a proclamation of that foundation. You don't start a very locally focused business with intentions of heading out anytime soon. Really quickly, just to why did we start this thing? And you'll get little snippets of this as we go on as well. But when we looked at problems that needed to be solved in the Chattanooga area and sort of the skill sets that I as a founder could bring to bear, I have a background in materials processing. I worked at a company down the street called Environmental Solutions Group, which is a leader in waste equipment and technology. They're located just down at 201 Main Street. Glass recycling popped up and a lot of conversations with different stakeholders in government, in the private sector, just ordinary people who wanted a solution to this problem. And when we started to look at this problem tied to glass, we realized that, hey, there's some bigger problems that can be addressed by tackling a material stream like glass. And we'll get into those in a little bit. Okay. So really quickly, I'm kind of a history geek. And since moving to Chattanooga, I've had a chance to dig into local Chattanooga history. I don't know how many of you are aware, but we were once really the glass capital of the Southeast. It started in large part with Coca-Cola's bottling operation here. Before Coca-Cola started bottling, there was a company called the Chattanooga Glass Company that had glass bottle manufacturing operations. And in many ways, that glass bottling operation enabled the start of Coca-Cola bottling. They were located in Alton Park. They existed until the late 1980s when the factory was finally shut down. And really that business slowed as glass lost favor for other types of packaging like plastic or aluminum cans. But we have a rich history of all sorts of different companies that existed from the late 1800s to the mid 1900s. A couple here in pictures for those folks who are joining us here in person. We've got a few show and tell items on the table. But companies like Chattanooga Brewing, right? Today's Chattanooga Brewing is a revitalization of legacy Chattanooga Brewing that shut down before Prohibition really took in full effect. That Chattanooga Brewing Company was founded by and run by a guy by the name of Charles Reef. And there was this whole line of soft drinks and near beer products that existed through the 1930s and 40s. You see a picture here, Reef Special. There were dairy businesses here, a picture of a milk bottle from United Dairies. The industry is rich with dairy histories of prominent individuals and interesting people owning various farms. The Chattanooga Medicine Company, this bottle on the bottom, is now present day Chatham. Before they were Chatham, they were the Chattanooga Medicine Company, and they sold a lot of products targeted towards feminine care issues of the day. Some people would call them quack medicines. Others would say they're herbal remedies. Those products no longer exist, but the history of Chatham lies here in the Chattanooga Medicine Company. Double Cola. If you're familiar with Double Cola, another sort of local Chattanooga institution that once was a lot larger, still has a prominent space in the cola market. They have their roots here, or they have different products they've released over the years, like their flagship Double Cola, Ski sodas, Marvel Cola. And then let's transition a little bit to the current day. So those products, those glass bottle products, started to fall out of favor in the 1970s and 1980s to the point where Chattanooga could no longer sustain a glass ecosystem. And that's really what led to the Chattanooga Glass Company shuttering its doors in Alton Park. If you go to Alton Park, you can actually dig in the area and find a lot of old glass bottles, big glass rocks that are cast-offs from Coke bottling manufacturing. It's a really interesting place. But let's look at today. Most of sodas are bottled either in plastic or in cans. The same is true with beers. You do have companies like Chattanooga Brewing, like Chattanooga Whiskey, which packages in glass, and they take their glass packaging really importantly. It's a big part of their brand to showcase how they're creating a product that's niche, that's of high quality, And my personal feeling is that we're going to see a little bit more packaging and glass as time moves on. A lot of the contrarian arguments to why glass shouldn't be used are now kind of swinging. That pendulum is swinging. And people look at glass as a premium packaging option. I don't know if many of you know this, but if you buy a beer or soda in aluminum can, it's lined with BPA. That's the only lining material that's used in any acidic drink today. The industry hasn't found any solutions. So as the public becomes aware that, hey, everything you're buying in plastic contains more microplastic, and I'm not shaming anyone. Drink your sodas, enjoy it. Just note that I think there's time for glass to have a bit of a renaissance here, not just in the area, but nationally. I'm going to continue this glass class for one more second, just because I love the subject. Do you guys recognize this picture? At least one part of this picture. There's a foreground and a background. Very close to us. So Velo Coffee Roasters down the street at 509 Main Street. They're a block and a half away from where we sit today. I just took this picture this morning and threw this in this deck because I thought it was an interesting connection to tie in that history of glass. What I'm holding here is a Chiro Cola bottle. Probably not many of you have ever had a Chiro Cola, unless you're were alive in the early part of the 1930s when the brand still existed. But if you don't know Chiro Cola, maybe you know Knee-High. If you don't know Knee-High, maybe you've heard of RC Cola. It's all the same company. RC Cola rebranded a couple of times and changed their formulation, but it started out as Union Bottling Company, and their flagship product was Chiro Cola, bottled just down the street in the present day location of Velo Coffee Roasters. So this bottle, which is over 100 years old, was once filled with soda just a block away from where we sit today. So this cool, rich glass history, really interesting glass products. What happened to glass recycling in our area? And does anybody really care? If you're here today, you probably care a little bit. But it started a little bit back about 10 years ago, when in 2015, the public became more aware here in our area that the glass they were recycling in curbside bins wasn't actually going to a effective end of use. It was being used as landfill cover. So that was the start of the dissolution of local glass recycling. Then in early 2018, if you can't see on the screen, that's just a headline from the Times Free Press saying that the city stops glass recycling. So up until 2018 here in the city of Chattanooga, you could put a glass bottle in your bin on the curb and Chattanooga would haul that away. Whether or not that made it into a new glass product or another effective use was another question to be asked. That same year, when glass recycling went away, the Times Free Press, really administered by the city of Chattanooga, conducted a survey to ask people, hey, do you care about glass recycling? Would you be supportive of glass recycling? And overwhelmingly, people wanted service. In fact, in talking with different stakeholders around the city, when people relocate to Chattanooga, even though this is not a large part of the waste stream, a service like glass recycling is something that they expect to see, especially if they're from outside of our area. If you've lived in the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, the West Coast, and you're a newbie to Chattanooga, the fact we don't have effective glass recycling is often a surprise to a lot of folks. When you're starting a business, and we are a business, it's important to figure out, hey, not only is there a problem that needs to be solved, but does anybody care? And would they be willing to pay a small fee, right, to make the solution come together? So this same survey indicated, yes, Chattanooga's would be willing to pay some small fee for glass recycling, and they'd be willing to separate it out of the curbside, because glass recycling really stopped because glass can't effectively be mixed with commingled recycled products. So what happens is when you put a glass bottle or a glass jar in with different waste streams, different recyclable streams, let's say cardboard or aluminum, all this goes into a bin or these smaller curbside bins. But what happens next? Those go into a garbage truck. And that garbage truck's job is to smash everything in that truck as compactly as it can, right? That improves logistics for the waste and recycling industry. When you smash a plastic bottle, it's largely stays a plastic bottle. When you smash a can, it's mostly a can, it may be flattened, but it's still recognizable. The same is true of paper and cardboard. But when you smash glass, glass doesn't stay in whole form. What happens, as you might expect, is it turns to a lot of shards, right? And what happens when those shards get to a recovery facility? and you need to separate out those streams. It's very hard to do that. It's dangerous for workers who work on the front lines to make that work. So to kind of prelude what I'll share over the rest of the time today, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. I've teed it up a little bit, but the ecosystem to support glass recycling in Chattanooga is fundamentally broken, and it's not just on the collection side, it's on the processing side. So to figure out how to make glass recycling work, you have to develop a truly local closed loop solution set. We have no residential collection today. We have no commercial collection, right? So if you're a bar, restaurant, hotel, a business of any size, and you generate a lot of glass waste, you serve products and alcohol and glass, or you serve other beverages, other food products, food waste, all of that largely goes into the waste stream today because it can't effectively be recycled. Interestingly enough, you'll still find dumpsters around town, recycled dumpsters that have old labels that will still say, hey, throw glass in the container. Those just have not been updated, right? Any glass that goes in a recycling bin goes to landfill today. We don't have local material processing. So what happens today is that glass that is recycled at the collection drop-off points, which represents about 6 or 7% of the glass waste produced in Chattanooga. So while it's great to have those drop-off points, they're really not an effective means at solving this problem. But what happens is a truck drives up from the Atlanta suburbs once or twice a week, depending on volume. That truck's empty. It drives back with a full load of glass bottles and jars. Those glass bottles and jars aren't crushed, meaning that there's a lot of air going back to Atlanta. And that whole process is very energy intensive. It's time intensive, so much so that it actually costs local entities more to recycle glass than to landfill it. So it's more expensive to recycle in that process than to send it to our local dump. What happens? So you got a lot of disappointed folks who aren't happy with these solutions today. As we'll talk a little bit more about our business and our solution set. We're an integrated collector and processor of material. What that means is we're closing the gap on collections. So for businesses who want to participate, right, we offer commercial size containers. For residents who want to participate, and smaller commercial customers, we have smaller bins. We handle that material ourselves, right? So we process that material in Ridgedale. We'll have a public grand opening on July 27th. So anybody's welcome to come from the public and see our facility, ask us questions, see what we do. It'll be a lot of fun. But the point is, having that processing facility in Chattanooga helps us minimize our logistics footprint and transporting the material to the processing site. And then our goal is to position as much of this product as possible in the Chattanooga market. So we'll talk what that looks like here in a minute. Through solving glass, we hope to address some other things. We hope to help preserve Chattanooga's natural resources. So if you buy gravel and sand, which are two of the larger applications we'll be providing materials into, a lot of that material is mined locally. People usually aren't so happy about that when that happens in their own backyard. So that might not be something that affects you if you live here in the heart of the city of Chattanooga. There are a few aggregate mines, but not so much on the sand side. But if you're in the outlying counties, Marion County, Bradley County, you'll see relatively regular headlines about expansion of aggregate mining and folks who are not so happy about that. If you buy a product like pea gravel, so our main aggregate is just a fancy word for anything that's sort of rough in size, is 3/8 of an inch in size, which is a pea gravel substitute. A lot of pea gravel comes from riverbeds. Those riverbeds have gravel in them. People mine that material. That affects, again, our local stream systems. While we're at it, we hope to build some trust in recycling practices here in the area, help create some spillover effects where people want to recycle more because they see what we're doing with the material stream like glass. So I hit on this a little bit, but I'll touch on a little bit more. The average person in the country generates about 75 pounds of glass waste a year. And I prefer to use the term post-consumer glass because it's not really glass waste until you decide intentionally to throw it in the landfill, right? So after somebody has consumed a beverage or consumed food products that were packaged in glass, there's 75 pounds on average per person of that material. That equates to about 14,000 tons of post-consumer glass in Hamilton County alone. This is 2018 data, I believe. The county is about 360,000 folks. I shared a little bit about what we collect, but if you look at this map in the middle of nationwide glass recycling rates, There's a lot of variation. States like Maine have bottle deposit programs, legislation that encourages a material stream like glass to be recycled. States like Tennessee have less of that, right? And as a result, we have a lower recovery rate. So even while those drop-off centers are great to have, the end result is we collect in Hamilton County about 900 tons of that 14,000 tons. There's an opportunity there, right, to improve that, to divert material from landfill. And on the other side of that coin, every ton we divert from landfill becomes a product that can be used locally to preserve our natural resources. This doesn't include the outlying counties. So there are some other programs in places like Athens, North Georgia. If you're in any of those communities, you have no access to drop-off facilities. If you live in Lookout Mountain on the Georgia side, you can't take your material to the city or a county facility because the city has to incur a cost for processing that. That imposes a burden, a tax burden on the residents who are on this side. So that's not allowed. Maybe there's a few folks who do it, but it's really not great practice. And as I shared before, why does it get sent to landfill? Breaks into shards. We don't have any deposit programs here in Tennessee. Glass is also fundamentally a lower value commodity than other material types. So it's not worth as much as aluminum or paper. I think Norm and Michael can speak that compost is a similar dynamic, right? It's not worth $1,600 a ton for a compost material. So you don't have like a natural market incentive to collect and process that material without community participation in a market like ours. And then where you have very inexpensive landfill costs, again, that incentive to take material out of landfill is not there. So we have pretty low landfill costs relative to the rest of the country here in Chattanooga. If you go to a market like Maine or a highly dense populated area like the California coast, those landfill costs are a whole lot higher. That creates some economic incentives to pull material out of that landfill and divert it to a more effective use. So the first problem, right, that we're addressing, hey, this material sent to landfill, we hope to fix that. The second problem, which I touched on, our natural resources are not endless. These are just some recent high headlines from the last couple of years. But you'll see a lot of community complaints here on the left. A new sand mine in Marion County drew a lot of opposition. The expansion of the Walker County quarry is in the news right now. The neighbors aren't happy about it. We can't eliminate the need completely to mine materials from the earth for different industrial uses. We are growing as a society. We do have consumption needs, but repurposing a material, a waste material in particular like glass, to offset at least a portion of that is something we should all be trying to do. And then another headline here about sand mine in Grundy County. Sand mines are especially destructive to the environment. A lot of times they're mined from creek beds. The same is true of certain gravel types like pea gravel. So if you see nice round stones, nature created those stones over a lot of years, right? It had to come from somewhere. And they came from creek beds or river beds, which are then dredged up to provide those for us to have in nice landscaping projects. Another big challenge, people don't trust recycling. So there's a couple of statistics here from the Recycling Partnership that did a study in 2022 looking at, they created a confidence index tied to recycling and showed that a lack of public trust in recycling is a big issue. People don't think that recycling is worth the effort, then they're not going to do it. Meaning if you take your blue bin, if you live in the city of Chattanooga and you put your mixed materials in there, but you don't really know where they go. And you hear rumors about, a lot of stuff going to landfill and kind of your relationship with your materials ends at the curb. You're going to be less likely to participate on average, right? Than if you had a lot of confidence that what you were doing, your hard work to separate out your recyclables or your compost was going to a good use. That's a challenge. So beyond the curb, what we hope to address, at least with a material stream like glass. So less than half of those people surveyed in this recycling partnership survey felt that the items they placed in the recycling bin made it into new products. And only 17% of people felt well informed about what happens. So the goal, as we'll share in a little bit, is to have a facility that's open to the public, to be able to communicate where our material ends up, which projects, highlight those so folks are aware, explore radical transparency wherever we can. So folks know that when they take their time and energy to recycle a glass bottle or glass product with us, it's going to a beneficial use. And more often than not, beneficial use is going to be here in the Chattanooga community. So to summarize kind of our vision, three birds, one stone. We live in a glass house, so we don't throw stones, I guess. So maybe I need to come up with a different analogy. We aim to solve the glass recycling equation for the Chattanooga region. So I talked a little bit about the low value of glass and the challenges that creates because of the cost of logistics, right? You have to really be able to figure out a beneficial use here in the local area. So hence the need for local processing. You can't just start a glass collection enterprise without solving the processing side and without in parallel developing markets. So I shared that we have about 1,000 tons that's collected locally. We aim to, and I think this is a underweight goal, but at least double that within a couple of years. We hope in that process we can create a scalable playback for other cities. There are other grassroots initiatives across the country tackling material streams like glass. So much so that there's actually a lot of demand for the equipment we're using in our facility. We're able to purchase something on the secondary market, but lead times for the same glass pulverizer, which once were 2 or 3 months, are now 9 to 12 months because cities and private industries are realizing, hey, this is a challenge that needs addressing, and there are people who care. We hope to preserve natural resources to keep Chattanooga what it is, but in a more funky way. So utilizing these products in building and construction projects and landscaping initiatives, create some compounding effects, and working with organizations like Green Spaces to magnify that impact. And then, as I shared, rebuild trusts and recycling practices. You'll see us communicate a lot about what we're doing with products beyond the curb. We'll leverage some technology to do that and create visibility. Tying in connections to historical ways. Like when you think about history, a lot of history, field of anthropology, archaeology are built on waste products. Like when we look at Moccasin Bend and find artifacts, arrowheads, et cetera, a lot of those are broken, right? Because the native communities who use those products no longer had a need for them. And we learn about people through history. And a lot of the history tied to glass and industry here in the Chattanooga is also kind of overlooked, if you will, right? There was a lot of effort several years ago to build a Chattanooga History Museum, but there's a gap in our area tied to local history that we hope to fill in a small but meaningful way through glass. There may be a fourth bird with the same stone, which ties to a larger vision of the company too, which is to unlock storytelling possibilities for recyclable materials. And I'll share something at the end that kind of highlights that. So briefly hit on this already, but just to give you a little bit more detail, what you're looking at here on the left side of your screen is a map of our drop-off centers. The tags in green are city operated. The ones in red are Hamilton County operated. There's a couple of outlying ones that I would consider in our metro area. With all of those together, we capture about 1,000 tons. And then as I shared on the right, from a logistics standpoint, empty truck comes up from Atlanta, goes back down with bottles that aren't pre-crushed, high carbon footprint, really an ineffective way, non-sustainable way to continue a recycling practice. We are a logistics city, right? This is something we should be able to solve. So our business, vertically integrated, collected locally, processed locally, and then used locally. And what does this look like in practice? Bins like you see here for commercial customers, smaller bins for residential customers. Our first collection vehicle is this dump truck you see at the bottom left, which sits outside of our facility at 951 South Watkins Street. So if you want to drive by this truck sitting there, you can walk around it. Don't try to go in it, but it'll have our stickers, and that's where our processing is located as well. Why a dump truck? Well, we don't want to smash glass into pieces when we collect. We actually want to collect whole bottles, whole jars, et cetera, as much as possible. So what you do need, though, is something to put a bin like this, which is full of glass, it can weigh 300 pounds. So you need something of a commercial scale, and you'll see that little yellow thing on the side, which is called a tipper, which allows us to do that. We have local processing. The control panel for this piece of equipment is being shipped today from our manufacturer in New York. As I said, it's a used piece of equipment, so it didn't come with the computer that operated everything. It just came with all the pieces. So that'll be here hopefully by the end of this week or early next. This is a real picture inside of that facility at 951 South Watkins Street. And really just quickly to explain the process, starts with a large hopper, which is a container at the front of the process where we dump glass into. That glass is then metered onto this conveyor belt, which is what you see at the angle. It's fed into what Andela calls a pulverizer. If you're familiar with a mill, she looks a lot like what you'd see in the aggregate and mining space to create different grades of rock products. But this mill is customized for processing glass, meaning that the alloys used in the hammer, right, are the right strength to smash a material like glass and not wear down. What happens is there's a lot of hammers that smash this glass into different sizes. It goes then through a tumbling process so that all the resulting material, different grades of sand and aggregates, which I have here, probably won't display well on the screen, but afterwards we can do some more show and tell, come out in a relatively uniform size and without any sharp edges, right? So people hear glass, they think, oh, it's going to cut me. That's true if you just break a glass bottle on the ground, but when you tumble it, kind of like sea glass, right? It's not sharp. And again, our goal is to use this locally in different types of applications. So landscaping and building is a large one. Other industrial applications like sandblasting are also important. Also, this is a bit on the nose, but I think it's fun. Fun little coincidence. So we are literal national park city makers. Our equipment comes from Carlsbad, New Mexico, which is on the border between New Mexico and Texas. It's actually once owned and operated by the National Park Service. Like many large government projects, the process for the National Park Service to acquire this piece of equipment, I think, took almost a decade. This is a very storied piece of equipment in the manufacturer's history because of it holds a record for the longest sales cycle. It took them nearly 10 years to go through different processes to acquire this. Soon after they acquired it, they realized they couldn't operate it. They then donated the piece of equipment to the city of Carlsbad, which used it to create glass-based aggregates and sand for the national park system to use on trails. Carlsbad, unfortunately, ended up shutting down their recycling process, and this machine ended up sitting without a user or an owner. And now we can use it to help make the city a national park in a fun and interesting way. So I think we're good on time, but I'll share some thoughts as to why organizations should consider recycling with us. We've priced our services, tried to price our services to be a cost-effective way to be part of sustainable change for Chattanooga. Not only when you recycle with us do you get to keep material out of landfill, but you also create a direct offset for materials that would otherwise have to be mined or processed here in our area. So that double whammy effect. Hopefully, you can help build some brand equity with your team, with visitors, with customers, with residents, if you're operating a multifamily complex. We're very intentional about the color yellow, so you either love it or you hate it, but it definitely stands out. You'll see our bins on the curb. We wanted something that people realize, definitely don't throw your trash in here. That's for glass. You can close your own loop as a customer. So because we have a batch processing setup, we're able to run certain material types. So if we wanted to run all Chattanooga whiskey bottles and create aggregates and sand just based off of Chattanooga whiskey, we have that capability. If you're a bar, restaurant, property that wants to tell a story to your tenants, your visitors, we can take your own waste product and deliver your own materials back to you, which is pretty cool. And you can use those in outdoor applications. You can create terrazzo floors and counters with them. You can use them in plants. You could partner with artists to create mosaics. There's really a lot of diverse applications for material stream like glass. We're also kind of on this kick about being very open and transparent. For any of the members who recycle with us, we're opening up our facility to breakfast and lunch and learns. So if you want to bring your team in for a team building, share what we do with those materials, you'll be able to reach out and schedule one with us. And finally, if you do recycle with us, we have an employee referral program to help your employees or partners recycle with a reduced price. I'm going to go into a little bit more about the processing side, the material side for a minute. There's a 1-minute video. This piece of equipment is actually in Union County, Georgia, Blairsville. It's about 2 hours from here. It was installed probably about a year ago now. So this is a slightly larger, this is like the next step up from what we're starting with, but it gives you a good appreciation for what we're actually doing with the material and how everything works. So I think this is muted. Let me mute this guy. we'll save the voiceover music. So as I shared, right, everything's run by a control panel. That's literally in the mail for ours. It starts with figuring out glass supply. Glass is metered, as you see, onto this hopper. That just controls the rate of material going into the milling process. That material then goes into this pulverizer, which is a little bit of a black box. You can open it up and see how it works, but it's hammers and a trommel, so something that turns around. And that trommel has different size screens, which allow us to create different grades and sizes of product. Primary couple of products are like a 3/8 inch pea gravel size cullet. You'll see a little bit of residual waste in the cullet. Usually that's paper labels. So when you smash something, the paper labels will break apart. Plastic and trash, as you see here on the screen now, actually is removed through a separate part of the process. So that's what we do with it. It's very simple, very intuitive, very fast, right? I mean, we can recycle. Our recycling process can take as little as a minute, right? If we don't have backlog of materials. Get back on the screen here. Okay. So on the material side, why you might consider using overlooked materials like glass-based sands and aggregates. As I shared, reducing your impact on locally mined resources. Interestingly enough, glass-based aggregates perform better than natural mined materials, and that has to do with the properties of glass itself. So glass is hygroscopic, meaning it water molecules bind to it. It's sort of a magnet for water. It releases that water slowly into the soil. So it's very great for arid applications where you have issues with water retention. It's a fantastic filtration media. So the reason why a lot of these bottles exist today is because glass never decomposes. I say never, it takes about 1 million years, so none of us will ever live to see that bottle turn to something else unless we crush it. What that means is because it never decomposes, it never breaks apart, it retains its properties. So if you're filtering something, if you have permaculture like a rain garden, right? And you want filtration properties to be optimal so that water gets into different layers of the soil. If you use a naturally mined aggregate or naturally mined sand, that material will break down over time and create fines and sort of clog up your filter. It's like using a Brita or a pure water filter after 3 or 4 months, right? It just stops working because it gets clogged. Sands and glass-based aggregates don't have that issue. It also creates some extra light. So like when you use this in a landscaping application, it reflects a little bit. It gives plants in the area more light, more UV to synthesize into nutrients. As I shared, you can enhance your storytelling with the material, using this material to communicate sustainable attributes of your project, customers and stakeholders. It's cost effective. So we've done our best to keep costs low, buying used equipment, keeping logistics at a minimum here in the area. So we're able to deliver products within a cost range of naturally mined aggregates. So bulk pea gravel and coarse sand, it's in that range, that ballpark. If you need 100,000 tons of aggregates, right, we probably can't help you. But for a lot of small and mid-sized projects, our goal is to keep pricing competitive. And there are a lot of other applications beyond landscaping, outdoor and building applications that I mentioned. Glass, counterintuitively, is a very effective media for sandblasting. And the reason is, unlike naturally mined sand, which is crystalline, if you were to look at it under a microscope, it's got all these sharp edges. If you breathe a lot of naturally mined sand in, it can lead to something called silicosis, which is not a great condition to have. It scars your lungs. When you create sand from glass bottles, the sand actually retains the property of the glass, and at a microscopic level, it's smooth. So even though glass, will cut you if you break it on the ground and it's sharp, when you mill it down to a very fine powder, it's smooth and safe. And as a result, it is the most widely used blast media in the marketplace after ash, fly ash. So folks prefer to use glass-based sand for cleaning industrial applications rather than natural sand. Great water and pool filtration media. It lasts, again, similar to the degradation, it lasts 5 times as long if you use it in a pool filter than naturally mined sands. So I'll almost close here. I have one more slide, and then we should have some time for questions. But on that component about rebuilding trust, our facility is going to be open. You'll see more pictures over the coming days as we finish painting our office space, decorate our mini glass museum. So even if you aren't a proponent of recycling, we'd invite you to come learn about history, and vice versa. If you're a proponent of recycling, but you don't know about history, come learn. We'd love to have different folks come and check out what we do. We'll have that glass museum. We'll have open house days regularly. We're looking at probably once a month right now. If there's a lot of demand, we'll look at scaling that. And then it's a fantastic place to have events. We don't want to be an event-based business, but if you can imagine having a fundraiser where you can bring people together in a fun space, celebrate something, raise money for a good cause, and at the end of that fundraiser, turn all of the waste into products that can be used for a cause or taken home by participants. We see that as another engagement mechanism. Sources and uses, we'll share that data for anybody who wants to. This is, you should recognize this map. This is from Green Spaces. We'd love to see companies who use our products share more about those products. We'd love to see folks who recycle with us share their brand and logo if they're interested. Totally optional. We won't force anyone to do this, but we'll create that option for anybody who wants to. And then material composition. Our thesis is that a material stream like glass might not be worth as much as a material stream like aluminum, but there are ways to improve the value of that product, and that's to enhance that storytelling component. So being able to track that inbound glass supply and then link it to the products that are created. And I shared this example at the Entrepreneurship Week held by the city a few weeks ago, and it ties to Finley Stadium, who's also hosting the next Green Drinks here at the end of the month, who's also a customer of ours. So anything you drink at Finley Stadium on June 27th will be recycled. An empty bottle of Mick Ultra, what is that worth? So for those who don't know, they just unveiled this Mick Ultra Lounge, a branding partnership that allowed them to create a unique event space. If you have an empty bottle of Mick Ultra here in the Chattanooga market, that has a negative value, right? It's currently a waste product. Somebody has to handle that. We've assigned a nominal value of -2 cents to that. What's that Mick Ultra bottle worth? If you turn it into sand, maybe a nickel. It's not a lot of sand. It take a lot of Mick Ultra bottles to make a lot of sand. We hope to capture a lot of the local glass supply and turn those products into material that can be used locally. And then, what's that sand maybe worth if we were to source separate it, and if we collected it on the day that CFC won a championship for their inaugural MLS Next Pro season? Well, maybe it's worth a little bit more than 5 cents, right? So we're going to take the care to collect it separately. Can we create a memory in that product tied to an event or a special occasion? And we're going to be looking for ways to partner with different folks around town to extend that. And that helps supplement the whole business model and makes the baseline services more affordable for everyone else. So if Chattanooga FC gets to this point, whether or not they ask us to, we'll be separating the material and creating some sand and partnering with them, even if they don't pay us a quarter per bottle. So I'll close here. Next steps to join our movement. You can join the residential recycling program. You get a nice, pretty yellow bin like this. We do a monthly collection. That is a sweet spot for a material stream like glass for a residential single-family home customer. That ties to that average 75 pounds per year, or maybe average household size of 4. That equates right to about 2/3 to a full bin per month. Now there's a lot of variation, right? Some people love bottled water in glass, some people love beverages in glass, and they may use multiple bins. So it's very much an average figure. For folks who need more, it's a very cost-effective way to add an extra bin to the program. If you sign up soon, using this code here, you can take home your recycling bin today, or within the next couple of days. By the end of tomorrow, that code will expire and you can start recycling with us. We have a commercial interest form. Our commercial pricing is also transparent. It'll be updated on the new version of our website, which will be released in a couple of weeks. So we want to make that a very, again, open and transparent process for folks who want to recycle with us on a commercial basis. But it starts at $45 a month, which is about 200 to 300 pounds of glass, and it scales very effectively. So if you have a lot of material, it's much less expensive per bin or per unit. On the material side, we'll be producing materials here within a couple of weeks. We'll have more information about those on our website soon. Fill out the form on our website, shoot us a note. We'll add you to our wait list and get you some samples when that's available. You can see samples here. We have small quantities, but the machine's not operational for large. Encouraging local businesses and organizations to recycle with us. So that could be, your favorite bar or restaurant, right? When you see glass being thrown away, give them a little elbow and say, hey, there's a better way to handle material stream like glass. You should check these guys out. And then for everybody in the room, come check us out at our first open house. Again, July 27th. We'll share hours and more details with the public, but it should be a fun occasion to show what we built and what we're trying to build here in the Chattanooga area. So I'll end, and I think we've got 10 minutes for questions.